Hey, it's Jeff Zito, and thanks for checking out another episode of the Celebrity Jobber Podcast. Currently number 2 on Apple Podcasts Music Interviews chart. Thank you so much for checking us out. Past episodes and guests online at celebrityjobber.com. Not to mention, you can follow us on IG, celebrity_jobber_podcast, or our YouTube channel, which is youtube.com/celebrity jobber. What would become of some of these people if not for making it big? What was the big break, if you will? And what was their life like before they reached superstar status, if you will? My guest today was one of the members of one of the biggest Southern rock bands in the world. Not Lynyrd Skynyrd, but 38 Special. You know, Lynyrd Skynyrd, Ronnie Van Zant, his brother, Donnie Van Zant, very influential in the band 38 Special. But their hits were not sung by Donnie Van Zant. The hits of 38 Special, Hold On Loosely, Rockin' Into the Night, Caught Up in You. Don Barnes just so happened to be the lead vocalist on all of those songs. 38 Special just released their first studio album in over 20 years called Milestone last week. So we'll talk to Don about that album, his early life before the band, some of the jobs that he had before 38 Special took off. What did his dad do for work? And what was he trying to push Don into as well? And the moment that changed everything for Don Barnes and 38 Special. We are about to find out. 38 Special's Don Barnes is my guest this week on Celebrity Jobber.
The Celebrity Jobber Podcast with Jeff Zito. If you like what you hear, please subscribe, give a 5-star rating, and leave a review. Check out all our past episodes on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you pod. What if these celebrities weren't famous? What would they have become? What was their first job? We're about to find out.
The big story, I guess, here of the last few weeks is that this is the first studio album from 38 Special in over 20 years.
Yeah, you know, it was just, the live business is gone through the roof. Everybody's out there running around the country and around the world. I've got 16 guys out here and their families, and they all rely on this band to keep everything going. Everybody's solvent. So we're just basically taking care of our people. We're doing over 100 cities a year. And, I had bits and pieces of songs, but I just didn't carve out any valuable time to go into the studio and put something out. But the 50th anniversary came up. It was to commemorate this big milestone, and I couldn't think of a better word to call this album but milestone. So, it was a labor of love. We put some great songs together. We had finished. I started writing back in last year, finishing some of these ideas, and so it's come out. It's been out about 3 days now, been released. So we're really excited about it. A lot of different diverse songs with some big guitar bangers in your face songs, and mid-tempo introspective songs. Had some co-write, some people. So I was honored to have some of those guys, Randy Bachman, Jim Peterick from Survivor, and Pat Monahan did a duet with me he's from band Train. And so it was just a great time. It was time to put something together for a 50th anniversary. And, we're real happy about it, real excited about it.
And Don, you mentioned the name Jim Peterick, and, you guys go back a long ways, and Jim was in the band Survivor at the time. Can you tell me the story about, I think, what was the first hit that he was involved with? Was it Rockin' Into the Night, where it was 3 out of the 4 members of Survivor wrote this song and it ended up in your lap? Can you tell us that story?
Yeah, it was a demo that was sent to us. It was a really kind of a crappy demo. It was like very scratchy, just a quick, hurried demo. But they were going to put it on their album, and their producer felt like it didn't fit them very well. So it made its way through A&M Records and came our way, and we decided we'd give it a try. It was a chant song. We didn't have a song that had a chant, rocking into the,
Right.
And so we put it together, and we at the time we had 2 albums out that didn't do so well. So we got the door opened at radio a little bit with that song. And so my manager said, would you like to write some songs with this guy that did Rockin' to the Night? Sure. So we went to Chicago, and we were in his house, a pretty, modest house. And I didn't realize he had done I'm Your Vehicle, from Ides of March.
Right. Wow.
17 years old. Yeah. And so we sat at his kitchen table, and the first day I ever met him, and he said, "So how you guys been doing?" I said, I was actually been in a relationship, was kind of going south. And I said, man, what is it about people with, they can't tolerate their differences. They try to change the other person in the relationship. They try to keep them under the thumb. Anyway, I had the notebook open, and songwriters have notebooks with lines and titles and all kind of things. You hardly ever use them, but you have something there. I said, well, I looked down the notebook. I said, what do you think about this song, this title, Hold On Loosely? And he said, oh yeah, but don't let go. And that was the first thing out of his mouth. It was a perfect couplet, perfect bookend. And we were off to the races, and he starts framing a story of how that happens in relationships, so we found the most fortune in relationship oriented songs since then. We've been doing it all these years.
Were you able to salvage the relationship, Don?
No, that went
south.
Went away a long time ago. Yeah.
Well, I thought maybe maybe the popularity of the song could have changed a lot of people's minds, right?
Yeah. Well, she knew that the song was about her,
right.
But it was one of those things. But what's funny that you mentioned that, because I was dating this woman a little bit after that, and I said, and we're contractually obligated to have an album out 6 months from there. We had already done a 9-month tour. We were worn out, and we didn't have an idea of one single note going on this album, And it's like the publishing deal, the guy writes a book, and I woke up this morning, ...
Right.
So I told the woman, I said, I just can't seem to get any work done. I'm just so caught up in you all the time.
Wow.
And it was like a light bulb went off. It's like, that's a pretty good title. That's positive. It's, it could be, we could turn that into something. So I wrote that with Jim Peterick too, and Jeff Carlisi, the original guitar player in the band. But he had been in Survivor, like you mentioned. And one of the guys, Frankie Sullivan, was in Survivor, didn't want him writing with outside writers or with other people.
Right.
So what's funny is we had to sneak around, and we wrote Caught Up in You down in this dingy basement of his mother's house. We didn't want Frankie coming by his house and seeing us there, so we had to go to his mother's house.
Well, like you guys were cheating on your girls, sneaking around.
That's true, yeah.
The Celebrity Jobber Podcast with Jeff Zito.
When you think about businesses that are selling through the roof, sure, you think about a great product, a cool brand, and brilliant marketing. But an often overlooked secret is actually the businesses behind the business, making selling simple. For millions of businesses, that business is Shopify. Nobody does selling better than Shopify. They're the home of the #1 checkout on the planet, and the not-so-secret Shop Pay that boosts conversions up to 50%, meaning way less carts going abandoned and way more sales happening. Businesses that sell more sell on Shopify. Upgrade your business and get the same checkout Allbirds and Skims use. Sign up for your $1 per month trial period at shopify.com/start selling. All lowercase. Go to shopify.com/start selling to upgrade your selling today. Shopify.com/start selling.
This is the story of the one. As a custodial supervisor at a high school, he knows that during cold and flu season, germs spread fast. It's why he partners with Grainger to stay fully stocked on the products and supplies he needs, from tissues to disinfectants to floor scrubbers. All so that he can help students, staff, and teachers stay healthy and focused. Call 1-800-GRAINGER, click Grainger.com, or just stop by. Grainger, for the ones who get it done.
The Celebrity Jobber Podcast with Jeff Zito.
So, Don, growing up in Jacksonville, tell me a little bit about your mom and dad. What kind of business did your family? What kind of business were they in? Were they musical people also?
My dad was the music director for the Baptist Church. He was, I started early rumblings of chord patterns and things that from a very young age, from just, he played a little piano and he was the music director, but he was a train engineer for 40 years. He started as shoveling coal in the old locomotives, and he built himself up to brakeman, and then he finally became an engineer. And his work ethic kind of rubbed off on me, but he would pull these trains that are 2.5 miles long with 5 diesel engines, 2.5 miles. It would take a mile to stop.
Wow.
So I rode up on the engines. Yeah, that's the truth. It takes a mile to stop. There's so much weight behind him. But I rode up in the engines a few times. But that's his work ethic, and he went 40 years of driving a train, and he was finally retired. And he was always supportive of me. He drove me around playing the birthday parties at 13 years old, with the little guitar and amp and the big trunk of his big Mercury, But he was always supportive, and by the time I was 20, I was still struggling trying to do it. And, he would say, son, I was doing day jobs. I was married with a baby and everything, And he said, you ever going to make any money from this? Dad, I think it's around the corner, but it was a pretty wide corner. But he ended up lining his den with platinum and gold albums all the way around. Man. And he would bring the neighbors in and show them all. So.
Oh, man, that's awesome. That makes you feel good. Dad, you made him proud, man. So when you were just saying that, though, when he was like, hey, man, you're 20 years old, and he's like, well, what's going on? You said he's supportive, but was he maybe encouraging you to get into another job to make some money? What do you think he wanted you to do?
He wanted me to get started on the railroad, and I didn't want to do it. I was just like, no, I'm going to be. I mean, I was working jobs because I had to support a family, but I was dead set on not making a career in the railroad. I wanted to do this and thing, and I felt like I could do it. That's the thing. If you had the confidence to know that you might be green at the time, but you feel like you can develop your talents and learn as you go. And, I've told these young guys that they want to get a record deal. I said, buddy, if you absolutely have to do it, but if there's anything else with some stability to fall back on, if you're good with your hands, carpentry, schooling, or whatever, do that, because there's no guarantees. You can give 110% and still not make it. So it's just one of those things that we were too stubborn to quit, but we definitely went through a lot of disappointments, a lot of failure. I've told these young guys, you got to accept a lot of failure. Nobody knows who you are. They don't care whether you live or die. You're out there trying to make your mark, and you're sacrificing everything.
Right.
Anniversaries, holidays, but you got to rehearse. You got to be 5 steps ahead of yourself. I don't want to sound discouraging, some of these guys, but it really is one of those things. If you absolutely have to have it, but if you do it for the wrong reasons, some of these guys that do it for the pretty girls or the partying or whatever. I said, man, you got to be an artist. You got to have your material together. You got to be, like I said, 5 steps ahead of yourself. So, people ask me, if you had to do it over again, what would you change? I would probably have a better time at it. But we were doing all these arenas were sold out every night, but we had to be 5 steps ahead of us. You see the marquee sold out. Yeah, that's all well and good, but we've got work to do. We've got so much ahead of it, so it's one of those things, it takes all your time.
The Celebrity Jobber Podcast with Jeff Zito.
Doug. Here we have the Limu Emu in its natural habitat, helping people customize their car insurance and save hundreds with Liberty Mutual. Fascinating. It's accompanied by his natural ally, Doug.
Limu? Is that guy with the binoculars watching us?
Cut the camera. They see us.
Only pay for what you need at LibertyMutual.com.
Liberty, 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 liberty.
Savings vary. Underwritten by Liberty Mutual Insurance Company and affiliates. Excludes Massachusetts.
This is the story of the one. As a maintenance supervisor at a manufacturing facility, he knows keeping the line up and running is a top priority. That's why he chooses Grainger. Because when a drive belt gets damaged, Grainger makes it easy to find the exact specs for the replacement product he needs. And next day delivery helps ensure he'll have everything in place and running like clockwork. Call 1-800-GRANGER, click Grainger.com, or just stop by. Grainger, for the ones who get it done.
Celebrity Jobber.
Don, tell me, you were mentioning, you had to do, you had other jobs to fall back on during those times. Can you tell me about some of those jobs and and if you remember your very first job?
The first job I was made donuts. I would come up. I'd be playing in a band. Now Jacksonville, Florida, is a Navy town, and there was a lot of 5 naval bases there. So all of us learned from a very early age to play in these sailors clubs at 15, 16 years old. You're playing cover songs, The Doors and the Young Rascals and Three Dog Night and all those cover songs back in the hits of the day. And but I'm talking about Dwayne Allman, Greg Allman, Ronnie Van Zant, Alda Skinner, Molly Hatchet, Blackfoot, everybody. I mean, Outlaws came right from there. They'd come up to Jacksonville.
Yeah, from Tampa Bay.
Anyway, but yeah, so you would you didn't realize at a young age you were absorbing this fundamental foundation of songwriting because every song you had to work out and rehearse. You start seeing the payoff. You see with the pre-chorus, where the bridge, the outro, and all the things that go into songwriting, and you see the craft of it, the way it's done. And so you do that for a few years, and you get a little cocky, and you think, well, I can write my own songs now. And that's when you go starve for the next 10 years. So it's just not something I recommend.
So you said your very first job was making donuts. What else? Can you tell me a couple other jobs you had?
All right. Let's see. I felt like I did 50 of them, but I was, like I said, a young man married with a baby. I made house trusses. I was the webbing guy on the house trusses. Went from there to driving trucks, which I did. I liked that because that was out of an office or out of a building. And you could, as you're driving along, you can, make up things. I was writing songs up in the cab of the truck, driving in traffic and did all that, delivered all kind of things. And then I got another job as a pest control man. I was out there spraying houses and everything. But I wrote a song with Randy Bachman on this Milestone album called Long, Long Train. And I told him, I said, man, you're part of a real pivotal moment in my life. First of all, I played his songs in high school and Guess Who songs and all that stuff. And I told him, I said, I was a landscape guy. I was a foreman in a landscape company. And I was out there digging palm tree holes. They're like 5 feet wide, 5 foot deep. And you know how Florida has a lot of palm trees,
right.
So I was down in this hole digging, and I was the heat and humidity, and the radio was hanging on the mirror of the truck there, and it played the intro to Taking Care of Business, that blum, bum, ba-da-da-da-dum, dum, And I thought, down in this hole, I can play that right there. That guy's on the radio. I got to get myself literally up out of this hole and get to work and I want to get on the radio. I can play that, if that's what it takes, So he loved that story, I told him. But, that many decades later, I'm sitting there writing a song with Randy Bachman.
That's cool.
The first, and that's something funny how things come full circle like that.
It is, man.
The Celebrity Jobber Podcast with Jeff Zito.
Lowe's knows how to help make your home holiday ready for less. Get Select Style Selections vinyl flooring for just $1.99 per square foot and have it installed before the festivities begin. Our team can help you every step of the way. See a Lowe's Red Vest associate or visit Lowe's.com/holiday install to get started. Lowe's, we help, you save. Basic install only. Date restrictions apply. Subject to availability. Installed by independent contractors. See associate for details. Contiguous U.S. only.
Celebrity Jobber.
Well, what do you think it was, Don? Like, everybody talks about making it big and having a big break. And for a lot of guys, it is like over time, it's gradual. But was there a moment in time, something happened, whether it was a song on the radio, whether it was signing a record deal, a moment in time, a thing that happened that changed your life forever, maybe a big break?
There were several moments like that, and we did it slowly. You know, it's a slow burn. You get on first of all, playing clubs and trying to get a fan base, but then you get a little bit lucky and get on, be the third act on a show, on a 3-act show, you know, and we started out, of course, playing all those clubs. We're all huddled together because the stage is so small in the corner somewhere, and we get on these stages that were 80 feet wide, and we're still huddled together like we were used to, and you realize, oh, you got to spread out. Oh, I see. You know, so you learn as you go. But one of them was we slowly would play the bars and little bigger rock clubs, and then we play the theaters, and we try to build up to. And you don't want to jump into something really big too fast, because then it looks like a failure. You know.
Right.
So we were scheduled to play the Meadowlands Arena. This is like 1984. And you got handlers, you got managers and accountants and everybody behind the scenes, and they're like, oh, you don't want to go in there and try to. It's 24,000 seat arena,
right?
But we had been up in New Jersey, we'd been around, we felt like we'd garnered all this fan base for all that year, and they were saying, you don't really want to go in, you want to go to a smaller venue. And we're like, no, we feel like they'll come out there, and we could go in and do this. And they're like, okay, well, it's your funeral, you know. So we went in there. And let me tell you, 24,000 people showed up in Meadowlands Arena. It was all the way around this place. And Donnie Van Zandt and I were looking at it, and we could hear the roar of that crowd. I said, listen to that. And that was, I'm getting chills just talking about it. That was a turning point. You realize this actually worked out.
Wow.
After all the starvation, all the struggles, and all the problems and disappointments, you got a roar of 24,000 people roaring in the Meadowlands Arena, you know. So that was a big moment.
You know what's funny about that, Don, is that you said that was in 1984. So like that was after, you know, you had those big hits out on the radio. So it still took you that long to think of your, because I'm sure you had success. I mean, you had success prior to that, but that was the moment though that you were like, wow, we did it. Wow.
Well, you know, because we were always like supporting actor on a show or something, you know. Yeah, we did have some hit songs and radio airplay, and MTV, of course, did help, you know, but that was, but you're always looking for something bigger, and that was the big milestone there. Wow. You know, that was a pivotal moment. But the MTV, we were the 13th video on the first day.
That's right.
Played that, they opened it. And, they didn't have any content. It was a little cable channel. No one had any content. My manager, we were out in Denver, it was Rainbow Music Hall, and he said, they got this cable channel called MTV. They want to bring their own cameraman, 3-camera crew out there to film you guys live. Do you mind doing that? I'm like, who is it? Some cable channel. What? You know? And so I said, sure, if they want to do it, you know, we don't know what anything about it. But I remember they came out and filmed, and the guy wanted me to do a little spot, but read me a card on the camera to say, you're watching MTV, you'll never see music the same way again. And I thought, what a strange slogan that was, you know, this little cable channel. And I guess I wish I'd have bought stock in the company back then. But I just dismissed it. But we were like the 13th video the first day, and everybody's got 2 or 3 feet of hair. We looked like bridge trolls. We weren't quite ready for prime time, but you know, I guess it was a different look for everybody.
And,
you know, but
here we are all these years later, and a new album, first studio album in over 20 years. It's called Milestone. And I know that Donnie Van Zandt's participation on the road has been, you know, I think he kind of stepped back maybe a few years ago. What about now and coming out with Milestone? Is he going to be involved a little bit out on the road with you guys?
Yeah, he does. He comes out every now. He suffered inner ear nerve damage after 40 years. But he always wanted us to point these big 6-foot amplifiers at him so he could hear the guitars and all that. So, well, it took its toll on him, and the Mayo Clinic read him the riot act and said, buddy, if you continue doing what you're doing, you only have a few nerve fibers left in your ears. They said, if you continue doing what you're doing, you're going to be absolutely stone deaf. There's nothing we can do for you. And so he he had to leave the road because it's not worth it. I
No.
told him, I said, man, if they told me, hey, I'd be gone tomorrow, But I told him his brother Ronnie, who we lost in 1977, I said, he would have been so proud that you made it 40 years. So he's still my partner. He still owns the trademark. He gets a licensing fee every year. And, he does participate. Every now and then he'll come out and do like 1 or 2 songs.
Okay.
I'll tell him, we've got these inner ear monitors, in-ear monitors, And I said, we'll keep everything down. We'll keep it low in your head so you don't, He goes, no, you don't understand. I got to have it on 12 to even hear it. So he does come out when it's some charity things. He's come out and done, and of course the crowd goes crazy because he was the one that wanted me to start singing back then because we had already done 3 albums of him singing. He's got a little more earthy, bluesy voice, but it wasn't so adaptable to radio. And so I sang a couple songs and it started happening, and we're still brothers and we're still a team. And it was always like, it doesn't matter it doesn't matter who carries the ball as long as we're still a team, as long as we win as a team, So that was always our creed, and he's always been supportive. Never any jealousy there. We always split the songs and all the records and everything. So he's always still, even to this day, I talked to him just yesterday. He's got these $10,000 hearing aids in his head. He hears better than ever. He hears better than he ever heard before.
That's great. Well, I got to tell you,
Yeah.
Don, I'm really glad the engineering deal didn't work out for you. So this album is called Milestone. It was just released, the first studio album for the band 38 Special in over 20 years. Don Barnes. Real pleasure speaking with you. Good luck to you the rest of the way. Not like you need it, but really good
we'll
stuff.
try for 50 more.
Man, I tell you what, that's awesome. But I just wanted to say some of that stuff, man. Digging the palm tree hole and thinking about Randy Bachman. And the couple of the other stories that I've never heard before. Really cool, man. Really appreciate your time this afternoon, and good luck with the album.
Well, thanks so much. I appreciate it, Jeff. Thanks for having me on. And I just want to say thanks to everyone all these years that have making us a part of their lives. It really has helped. It changed us. And come see us sometime. We always bring 110%, and we'll unfold that history for you, and you'll walk through all your memories and new surprises, new songs, Milestone, and be checking it out. Thanks for having me on, Joe.
Awesome, Don. Thanks again. Take care.
Thank you, buddy. You too.
There were so many parts of that interview that really hit me, but I would have to say the story that he told about, his quote unquote big break or the moment where he felt his life changed forever. He talked about 1984 at the Meadowlands Arena. That's called Brendan Byrne Arena. I'm from New Jersey. I know all about that arena. It fits about 20 some odd thousand people. And he mentioned like that place sold out, filled up for him in 1984. And he looks at Donnie Van Zant and he goes, hey, man, we did it. We finally made it. And I found that to be very interesting because, Caught Up in You and Hold On Loosely and Rockin' Into the Night, that was all, prior to 1984, even in the late 70s as well. So for him to say that he felt like his life changed and that he made it in the mid 80s, to me, I was a little surprised by that. He said he was an opening act for, a lot of bands, and he mentioned 38 Special did have, hits on the radio, but it was that moment in time that he was like, wow, we did it. So I thought that was pretty interesting. Growing up in Jacksonville, Florida, his daddy working on the railroad and actually tried to push Don into working on the railroad as an engineer as well. It wasn't what Don's dream was, but, his dad wanted him to have some stability and talked about all the different jobs that he had to do, because he was, he had to support a family, and he said he starved for about 10 years. And all of his jobs that he talked about, the first job being one at a donut shop, and said he did landscaping and just a whole bunch of other jobs, digging holes for palm trees, you name it. This guy, he did it. And now the first new album for 38 Special in 20 years. It's called Milestone, and it just came out last week. And if you're a fan of Southern rock, this is definitely something that you're going to want to check out. And Donnie Van Zant, the legendary Van Zant family. These guys are legends in Southern rock, with Johnny Van Zant, who's now with Lynyrd Skynyrd, and of course, the iconic Ronnie Van Zant, the original lead singer for Lynyrd Skynyrd, who passed away in the plane crash. The Van Zants are very important to Southern rock, and Donnie Van Zant had to step away from 38 Special because of ear problems many years ago. He had some ear problems, nerve problems in the ear, had to step away, but he's coming back. He's participated in the album, and he will participate a little bit on the road with 38 Special as they're touring the new album Milestone. Really great stuff, man. Thank you so much for checking out another episode of the Celebrity Jobber podcast. We are streaming on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, iHeart, wherever you listen to podcasts, plus past guests and episodes. You can go online, check them all out, celebrityjobber.com. Please subscribe. We'd love a 5-star rating and leave a review, please. Very important, and I thank you very much. Currently number 2 on the Apple Podcast Music Interviews chart. So thank you so much for checking out this podcast, and got some huge guests coming up in the very, very near future. And I believe Celebrity Jobber's very first billionaire coming up in the next couple of weeks. Again, thank you so much for listening, and until next week, this has been another episode of the Celebrity Jobber Podcast. I'm Jeff Zito.